Welcome to a mom to mom interview. I am really excited to add some more of these interviews into the YouTube channel and over on IGTV on Instagram, and also just having a little bit more of an elaboration from some of the podcast episodes that I do on audio only. So this week, in honor of Mother's Day, I decided to bring my mama, Joanne Miller, on and talk to her a little bit, just somewhat of her raising us as we were growing up, and really focusing on this topic of respect. Because when we were talking about what epitomizes, an important thing about us as mothers that we want to impart to other mothers, and this was what really stood out. So I want to just first off just kind of have an introduction of who my mother is, and then we dive into our 5 key elements of respect that we really feel are pillars, not just in our own homes, but even beyond into the general public. So welcome, Mama. Why don't you take a minute, just share a little bit about where you are at your stage in life now, and some of the books that you've written along the way.
Well, obviously, my children are grown. You are the youngest of 3, 2 older brothers, and I am now free to do a lot of things that I didn't do all those years when you were growing up. So I am an artist. I am an author. I've written 5 children's books, and I have been the author of Creating a Haven of Peace and also Be Your Finest Art. So I'm on another book right now, and I love writing. I love doing art. I love being this stage in my life, but I absolutely loved raising my kids also.
Mm-hmm. And yes, and one of those 5 children's books was actually written with my daughter Clara when she was 8 years old. And I would add to all of those things that you love and that you're skilled at, that teaching was a huge aspect of just who you are, and just you are such a natural born teacher. And so and I've shared before on the podcast that my growing up years, I did public school, private school, homeschool, group classes, co-ops, all these different variations. But really, even when it came to the schooling aspect, you just fostered such a growth mindset and a love for learning throughout my whole life. You were always teaching us all along the way. And I think that one of the most, I know one of the most critical principles and elements of that you have taught and instilled in me from a very young age has been this aspect of respect. And I think that respect, especially when we say respect and it comes to family, oftentimes the mindset can kind of go to this authoritarian type of parenting. It's my way or the highway. This is the way you respect me. And we kind of go into kind of a military role of don't ask, just do what I say. And that's not what respect was in our home. So I want to go into this, and you dive into this a lot in your book, Creating Haven of Peace. Yeah, and Creating Haven of Peace. Tell me, say the full title, because I love your full title for that too.
It's Creating a Haven of Peace, meaning your home, when you're feeling down, finances are flat, and tempers are rising, and they do. And you are exactly right. I think that we worked hard, and I see you and Nathan emulating this an awful lot, and I am so proud of the way that you all parent. But we did a lot to instill respect. I think parents forget that every move they make, every word out of their mouth, everything they do, it's being observed continuously by the children. And I don't care how young they are or how old they are, they need to be taught the importance of respecting themselves and respecting others and treating others with respect. And I think that's something that we started teaching very early on, because we just did not want to be disrespected as parents. Later, it astounds me at how much kids can get by with their parents when they're young, and then all of a sudden they're grown, and the parents cannot understand why they haven't gotten the respect that they thought they deserved at that point. There's a disconnect there, and I don't understand it.
Well, I think what you said is we have to really stick with the foundational aspect of it. If we don't have the foundation and we don't train and show them ways to begin with, how can we expect them to just automatically get there when they're older? And
That,
so that goes into that first point that we talked about as the key points for respect that we wanted to hit, and that's awareness. It's Nathan and I have talked about this a lot, where we people watch with our kids. We will bring awareness to a situation. It may be observing someone else, not in judgment, but just observing what their actions are, and what do you think they're thinking? What do you think they're feeling during this time? What do you think their story is? What's a story that can come from how you're taking their interaction? Observing different things like that, but then observing just our interactions in our household, or how our energy is. And that's something that of course I saw in my own upbringing as well, of bringing just awareness to what's going on around.
yes, and I've seen you when your children were quite young. Teach them that when they wanted to get your attention, they would come up to you and just lay their hand on your arm,
Right.
and they didn't say anything. They didn't interrupt. Oh my stars, that is so rare, Ashley. I so admired that in what you did with your children. And I see them waiting patiently to interject something, even when we're on a Zoom call. They don't just barge in and interrupt. And kids need to learn not to do that. That's just common decency, respect, and courtesy.
And that goes into even adding to the awareness thing. It's being aware of your surroundings. And so yes, it was me catching the kids and saying, before you start with your agenda, when you walk into a room, stop and see what's going on. Observe what is going around you. And so it's kind of just taking that moment to stop and to see where it is, where to go from there. So it's not a matter of you only speak when you're spoken to, or you're not allowed to have a voice. It's simply equipping our children with that superpower of being observant to your surroundings before you go. So with that, where I was going with that is that a biggie is knowing the why. So if you are bringing awareness into the situation, why? Why do they need to act this certain way? And can we explain that to our kids? That has been another thing where oftentimes, especially when we are new frazzled parents, we have young children at home, they're pulling at us, we have lots of demands, or quite honestly, there it's hard for me to say any stage of life where somebody doesn't have an excuse of being too busy and too overloaded, it seems. And so whatever the case is, we don't have the time, so we just say don't do that, and we don't give them an explanation. There's no, why should I not do this? What's the impact? What is this doing for me? And so having narration, constantly narrating what's going on, and your reasoning and your logic behind it, is a really, really powerful way of helping your children to gain awareness and to be able to have that element of respect, simply by um, starting to put the dots together. Oh, you mean that if I run in and interrupt mommy in the middle of her doing an interview, A, I have messed up and made it unprofessional for her work. I've B, thrown her off track so she can't decide on what it is we're doing. And C, very unlikely going to get a yes.
Yes.
So in other words, it's a lose-lose situation for interrupting. It's not just I don't like it, it's she's not going to get what she wants. So if you want to get what you want, then observe and see your cue for when is a good time to ask.
Excellent. Yes, I totally agree. You're
Wow.
a good mama.
Thank you. I learned from a wonderful one. All right, number 2 on the list was manners. And as I say, thank you. Talking about that, now I know, especially for you, manners was something that, my husband, Nathan, was forced to go to not forced, but highly suggested as a gift from his grandparents to go to cotillion class and do manners in that way. We, at this time, I mean, when I was little, not only did we not have the money to do something like cotillion, I mean, that we weren't going out to learn manners. We honestly weren't always, going out to eat or anything where manners were necessarily needed to be enforced. So if we're just running around as homeschool kids, why was it so important to you to add that part?
I think it's important to add that as when they're children, because you want them to be respectful and courteous and have good manners later on in life when they become adults, and that's hard to learn if you haven't gotten that foundation when you're young. But here's the caveat here. It's very difficult to teach children good manners if they aren't seeing it in the home. So Dan, here's a funny story that relates to this. Last night we came home. We'd been out to dinner with at a friend's house. We got out of the car. As we were getting out of the car, I said, "Thank you," and Dan says, "You're welcome." And I said, "What did I just thank you for?" And he said, "I don't know, but you always do. You're just courteous that way." We both got a laugh out of it. It was like, well, okay, he brought me home. Well, I do live here. I don't know why I was thanking him. But we have gotten so into that pattern. If we go out to eat
Right.
somewhere, he's taken me out to dinner somewhere. Now, we were at a friend's house, but typically if we go out to eat or we go somewhere together, I thank him for doing that because he didn't have to do it. And he does it because he knows it saves me having to cook, and he's respectful of that. So, but even after we came in, right away, he says, "Do you want a cup of tea?" Because he usually fixes tea for us now in the evening, an herbal tea that we like before we go to bed. And I really was just too tired for it. But he asked, and I said, "No, thank you." But that's the thing. Our everyday language is no, thank you. Yes, please. Uh, you're welcome. All of those common courtesies that we taught our children when they were very young, we're still doing it, and we're in our 70s because it makes us feel good about our relationship. It makes our relationship strong every single day. We are courteous to one another. It's very important. But kids don't learn that if it's beaten into them and not seen in their own homes. It's just mandatory that parents have to do this also.
Hmm. Yeah, and notice the things that you were identifying there is not manners, meaning you have to say yes sir, yes ma'am, sir, yes sir. Again, we're not going authoritarian. It's courtesy, it's respect, it's gratitude. And really
Yes.
that's a big part. And I would say manners, I would coincide with that. It's gratitude and appreciation. And that was really what you were enforcing with the manners. It
Yes.
wasn't that we had to have our silverware at the perfect spot, although you did teach us those things. And we did learn those, and we had our fancy tea parties, and we learned those elements of using good manners and the cotillion lessons and things like that. Really, what it boiled down to was common courtesy and appreciation for others. And that
You
I
know,
think is so valuable no matter what age you are.
I very true, Ashley. And something else that this brings to mind is when I was homeschooling you and you were in about middle grades or early high school, perhaps. One of our textbooks was "See You at the Top" with Zig Ziglar.
Yeah.
And another thing that I taught you that we worked on as a homeschool teaching was how to be respectful of people when you meet them. You
Hmm.
know, even shaking hands. If you recall, we talked about
Yes.
don't if you're shaking the hand of an elderly person and they're frail, don't squeeze the heck out of that hand because it hurts.
Right.
But if you are seeing somebody in a business setting that has a firm handshake, you give a firm handshake back. And it just little common courtesies like that, looking people in the eye, making
Hmm.
sure that you are hold your shoulders back and your head high and look them straight in the eyes. All of those little things are taught in the home. Trust
Hmm.
me, it's not going to be seen in a lot of places out in public, but you will stand out if you have those attributes. And all of my kids, I am proud to say, stood out. They were highly respected, not just by their peers, but also by the adults that they came in contact with. because of having learned those things in the house, in the home.
And that's something that a lot of in the homeschool world, you get that where people say, oh, they're homeschooled because they can talk to an adult. Well, it doesn't just have to be homeschooled. And right now, in a time where so many are homeschooled, use this as an opportunity to help your kids get comfortable with talking to people of different ages. In the public school setting or the traditional school setting where we are segregated, oftentimes by our age, most of the time, it can make it to where those are the only people that they know how to talk to, and that's something that in the homeschool arena or the Montessori or Waldorf arenas where ages aren't necessarily compartmentalized as much, you see a little bit more ease in that. That's a practice that you can always do with your children. Open them up, role play with them, and have conversations and give them the opportunity to try it out. They are not going to know how to talk with other people outside of practicing it. So give them opportunities to practice.
Do role playing. We
Right.
did that. We had fun with it.
Okay, next one that we have on the list is prioritizing yourself and your marriage. Now, you go deep into this in creating a haven of peace about your own story of not prioritizing yourself always. You were a key in prioritizing your marriage. Can you speak a little to both of those?
Yes, I think it's important to have a couple-centered home, not a child-centered home. And we did that right from the onset. And it's interesting to us always how often we don't see that played out in families these days. If the home is totally child-centered, what happens so often is that the mom and dad get lost along the way. I will have to say, yes, I did get lost in some along the way, but not in that respect. We had date night every week, and you children really respected that. Even when we couldn't afford to hire a babysitter, our neighbor girls loved taking care of you all, and they'd come over and take and play with you for a couple hours while we'd go out for a while, even if it was just for a walk in the park. But we were taking time for ourselves. One of the things I've observed, for instance, in with you all, is that you have made a habit of putting your children to bed early, like 7:00, because then the time after that is your time with Nathan. I think that's amazing. And to do that on a regular basis, that doesn't mean they have to go to sleep. If the older they get, that's maybe more difficult. But they could watch something on an iPad, or they could read a book, or they can draw. There's so many things they can do in their own room, and give you and Nathan time to have for yourselves. And I think that's highly important. Mm-hmm. Now, the part about respecting yourself, I didn't do quite as well. I didn't know that I could. I think that we have advanced a lot in our womanhood through the years, that we recognize now that it is important to take better self-care. It is important to put yourself first. That's not something that I ever considered that I had an option for until I got to be about 50, and all of a sudden I decided, wow, I just got fired from my job. You left home and went away to college. I had empty nest, and I didn't know where I was going. I do talk about that in the Creating a Haven of Peace book. It was a difficult time for me on many levels, and I go into more detail in the book. But it's something that I got through, and actually have had some amazing things happen since then, like writing books and taking up art and becoming an artist and selling my art and being in art shows and winning awards and all these things that have happened in the last 20 years that just amazes me in what was inside me that I didn't know I had. But I did make my career. My career was raising my kids and having a happy home, being a supportive spouse. And I don't regret any of that. I learned a lot through it. Mm-hmm. And I loved all of it. So it's important to remember that putting yourself first is needed. It's sometimes difficult when you've got small children, but do observe the fact that you and your spouse and your relationship with that spouse is far more important than some of the other things that need to be done around the house, or even than your children. You better be on the same page together in raising those kids.
And I speak a lot to it as having a family centered home where we are a family team. What one person does makes an impact on everybody else.
Amen.
And so we cannot, we have to acknowledge the needs of everybody. And because we as parents have the needs of providing, we have the added responsibility of providing for the others, our say has a little bit more clout than theirs. That being said, yeah, I mean, I use this exercise so often. I work with the couples that I work with. We look at who are they at their core and how do they recharge? Are they getting an opportunity to recharge so that they are coming to their family
Mhm.
as somebody ready for what the day brings, as opposed to being depleted and maxed out before the day even starts? So
Mhm.
going to that, but then like you said, being on the same page with your partner so that you two are a united front for
Yes.
talking to your children, for helping them in understanding the walks of life. It doesn't mean that you have to be the same personality style at all. You and dad are complete opposites.
Yes.
Nathan and I are opposites. We've done podcast episodes on how opposites attract. So it does not mean you have to have the same personality style. Honestly, doesn't mean you necessarily have to do all of the parenting the same way either. I talk about giving, if you want daddies to be involved, moms, get out of the way and let them create their own relationship, not be a substitute mother. So, yes, you can have different relationships with your kids, but prioritizing each individual relationship is important. That includes, like you said, that husband and wife duo. And yeah, we've done podcast episodes about, has your marriage taken a back seat to your children? And making sure that you prioritize it. When you come to your kids and you're trying to stand up and be the awesome mom that you are, but you're completely sleep deprived, and you got in a fight with your partner last night and you slept in separate bedrooms, and that tension is within you, that is something that there are studies that have been shown that you can gauge the likelihood of a marriage to survive and to succeed. You can gauge that based on taking urine samples of the children and checking their stress levels, because that is how much the relationship between you and your spouse affects the household, because your relationship and those dynamics are going to trickle down. And even if it's unspoken, there are so many ways that still is transferred. And that tension sometimes, I know, can be thick enough to cut with a knife, and your children are not oblivious to that, and that does affect everything else. So make sure you prioritize moments for you to recharge. And I'm telling you, 2 minutes can be a recharge for the day. It doesn't have to be, I have to do a 2-week vacation. 2 minutes. Take a few moments to take a deep breath. Give yourself some love and grace and an attaboy for having another day of working with your kiddos or whatever it is you do. Give yourself some love and respect, and take a moment and give your husband or your partner some love and respect as well. And check in with them so that you two are on the same page before going out to interact with your children.
Exactly. Well said.
Okay, number 4. Now, there's a lot that we can throw into this one, and I narrowed it down to just saying being authentic. If you want respect, when we are talking so much here about this is mutual respect. This is not just if you want your kids to respect you. Because like you said, and I mean, you said it, we kind of glossed over it at the beginning, but that was the biggest reason for us having respect for you guys as parents, was because we felt respect from you. I felt respected and validated as a child. And so there was no question. That kind of goes into our fifth one, which is the golden rule. So we've got a lot of things to cover between authenticity and the golden rule. And so with authenticity, there are three elements of this to hit on: natural consequences, honesty, and asking forgiveness. So in these natural consequences, I mean, being authentic, when we talk about that, just kind of what we were talking about right before this call, kind of talk about how it fits the punishment.
Well, do you want me to give the example that we were talking about?
Sure, you can do that.
Here's
All
a
right,
good.
here's a little insight into something I did in high school.
Yeah. Ashley was really a good kid. I did not have a whole lot of issues with her as far as having to discipline her a lot. She was an avid learner. She was a good kid. But when she got, I stopped homeschooling her when she entered, I believe, 10th grade because her brother had then graduated homeschooled. He was ready to go on with his life, and Ashley just felt like, I don't think I want to continue to do homeschooling. So we put her in a small private school that was as close to homeschooling as what we could come up with. She did very well. She was immediately in the Arts National Honor Society and the National Honor Society. She thrived. She went on vacation down to Florida with a bunch of the parents and the students from the school that she was going to. During that time, she managed to drink a little too much.
I
And
don't have any idea how I was able to drink what I did, but it was my first and very robust experience with a lot of alcohol and during a stretch, for sure.
and the interesting part to that is that she had signed an agreement with the school that things like that wouldn't happen. This was a
Private school.
yeah,
Yeah.
conservative in private school. And so she was not supposed to be doing this kind of thing. And certainly I would have never expected that because parents were going along. Don't know for sure the whole story at this point. It's been so many years ago. But I do know that she was mortified. She got suspended from school. She got thrown off the National Honor Society and the Art Honor Society for the rest of the year. And she wrote a letter to the principal apologizing. She was mortified. When she was telling me about it, I remember so clearly. I picked her up at school and she was just in tears. She was a basket case, and she cried it all out and she poured it all out, and she so said, "I'm so sorry," and she was so mortified. And I said, I just reached over and put my hand on hers and I said, "Ashley, it's okay. It's going to be okay. Let's go shopping." And we did.
Yeah, so I ended up with 3 days suspension, 5 days detention, 5 hours of community service. So those were all what was required by me or of me by the school, because I had signed a 24-hour rule for no drinking while being a student there. And yeah, it was. It, it was kind of a joke that, yeah, so I did all of that, and my friends like, "What'd you do?" "Oh, I went shopping with my mom." But then on the flip side, if you think about it, it was because you always looked at natural consequences. Are you naturally getting the consequence of your actions? And I enforce this with the kids constantly. Every action has a consequence. Every
Yes.
action has a consequence, period. So when you're thinking of disciplinary methods, make sure that it matches the action. So what is a natural consequence? Well, in this situation, I had a pretty natural consequence. I drank, I went against a contract with the school. I was penalized by the school. I had plenty of consequences through the school, and I had major remorse, and I felt so bad for it and wanted to do everything to do it right. At that point, you adding any more disapproval and everything on top of it, um, kind of looks at what is the goal with that? Is it to put me down even further when I'm already down? And does that help our relationship? And you
Exactly.
recognize no. And that was a really powerful point in our relationship of having that moment of me kind of coming to grips with the fact that maybe I'm not Little Miss Perfect, and that's okay. And and I'm still accepted even if I'm not Little Miss Perfect. So
Yeah,
those are.
I think when we talk about authenticity, that's also recognizing the
Mhm.
authenticity in others. I knew that you weren't a bad kid. This was not this was something that was a first for you. It was mortifying to you. It was kind of mortifying to me too, but as a parent, but I saw clearly that you were in your own um, what should I say? You were having your own consequences without me even adding more onto it. I didn't
Right.
need to, and I think that's so important in recognizing that to let the punishment fit the crime sometimes. And this again goes back to personality styles, Ashley, and because every child is not to be treated exactly the same.
Mhm.
If you have a child who is just melting because he did something that he knew disappointed you. I remember, for instance, with Kevin, our oldest, I don't remember what had happened. It's been so many years ago. But I remember him crying, coming down the hall to the bedroom, and he's got big tears in his eyes. I said, Kevin, what's wrong? And he said, I don't want to ever be a disappointment to you. And it almost makes me cry to talk about it. It's just, that is just so precious. He was a good kid too, and all of our kids have had situations where I wouldn't approve, and kind of, and sometimes actually when they got to be of an age where they were out driving and doing things on their own, there's some benefit to uh, what I don't know doesn't hurt me. And I'm sure I don't know all of the things, but I was always proud of my kids. I always tried to look at what was the crime, what was the punishment needed, and was that were they getting their own punishment in their own heads that I don't need to add more to it.
Mhm. And that goes into, so with being authentic, it's recognizing when you do something, when you mess up, what are you going to do from this? What lesson can you learn from it? Where can we go from here? What does this make possible? We talk about this a lot on this podcast, and doing these videos. Um, so with that is, being honest and asking forgiveness. We
Yeah.
are authentic in part of the fact that I think that I owned my consequences and I took personal responsibility for my consequences. And I did that at a pretty young age, and all of us kids did. That does not mean that we always, yes, had the best actions and that we didn't have to pay some pretty serious consequences for stupid decisions we made. That being said, it was that personal responsibility, and that was because we saw that from you guys as well. It was taking personal responsibility for our actions and being authentic. And that also means that you guys used that when it came to being honest and when you messed up yourselves. So,
Yes. Yeah. I remember a time when Jared talked back to me harshly, and back talk was not allowed in our family. It rarely happened, but something came out of his mouth. He was fairly young. I just
I know
and
exactly what you're talking about, and I can tell you where it was and where we were going.
I slapped him.
We were driving to Ohio, and
Uh,
Jared would not stop talking in the back seat. He was mouthing off about something, and it set you off. You turned around and slapped him, and I don't know whose face was more shocked, if it was him or if it was yours,
mine.
because the absolute mortification that went across your face because you did that
It,
was
it was what I was raised with. That's
right.
the way I was raised, to the point of abuse at times, and I never wanted to do that with any of my children, and I did, and it was like, oh my stars, what on earth?
Mhm.
And I said, I'm sorry, I am so sorry, and it was an interesting moment for both of us, I think, for all of us, because that was not the typical behavior in our family. But
Mhm.
recognizing that all of us are who we are, and sometimes the bad comes out and sometimes the good comes out, is part of being authentic. But owning up to that is another thing. Once when Jared was, and he's the middle child, he was, I've written about this, and most people know who know our family that Jared went through many years of drug abuse and alcohol abuse when that was first starting, when he was still just in early teens. He was driving though. We found out his behavior was just not acceptable in our home. And especially because you were still at home, you looked up to Jared, and we knew that he was your role model in many respects, and this was not good. So we had a big discussion with him, and I remember clearly him reaching in his pocket and taking out his wallet, his car keys, everything that gave him his independence, and handing it to Dan and saying, "Take those, help me." And that was a pivotal moment. But he trusted us to be able to do that. Now, I'd like to tell you that that was the end of all the problems. It was not. It was really much of the beginning. But my point in telling that is that we had a lot of trust with each other in the family, and still do. Our kids tell us sometimes more than what we want to know, and that's because they trust us, because we've always been honest with them. We never allowed dishonesty. I think every one of the kids can remember the one time they tried to tell a lie and they were punished. So,
and I will link to a few extra podcast episodes on specifically natural consequences and not telling secrets with your family. I am not a fan of opening the door to the weight of an adult's problems for a 5-year-old. So this does not mean that this means we divulge every aspect of family to one another. During the time that I was growing up, mom and dad lost everything. You lost your home, your car, and everything. You did not lie to me about it. You also didn't put the weight of where is our next meal going to come from on me either. And so it was being open and honest about where we are, being honest about, even if it's being honest about what your mood is for the day, and just saying, I'm feeling really crabby today. I'm short tempered today. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to work on this. But being authentic and admitting our own flaws is really, really important. And I think it's so critical to do, because in doing that, it also keeps us from being placed on this pedestal so high up where we can have a drastic drop. And sometimes if you have an authoritarian parent, it's my way or the highway. This is the way you do it. I don't do anything wrong. You follow the way I do. Sometime in your life, inevitably, you most likely are going to have something that's going to come to light that you messed up on, that your child's going to find. And that can be a huge blow. And if that precedent of a parent can do no wrong has been set for too long, when that happens, it can completely eliminate the relationship.
Oh, it can have a tremendous impact on that relationship. Totally agree with that.
Right. Yeah. And I've seen that with some of my friends who have had things come to light as they have entered into adulthood, and then they find out, they find out hidden secrets in their family that they had not been privy to, and all of a sudden it completely changes. What did I know as truth as a child, and things like that. Again, not divulging every family secret, not throwing every skeleton out of the closet, things like that, but just being authentic and honest with their kids, fessing up if, hey, I don't know the answer, or I'm sorry, I messed up. Or hey, I did believe that 2 years ago, and I've learned that I've grown.
You have seen that a lot.
Oh my gosh.
Ashley, how many times through the years I have learned. It's interesting because I taught my kids so much for so many years, and now I learn from my kids all the time. And I know my kids aren't kids anymore. I mean, I've got one that's about ready to turn 50 years old. So obviously we've been around for a while, and our kids are getting up there. But the stuff that I learned from them absolutely astounds me. I've changed my opinion so many times. I'm really adamant about the fact that we have to learn to change and grow all of our lives. It doesn't just stop when you quit raising children. It doesn't
Right.
just stop at a certain age mark. It goes on forever, or it should. And I learn a lot from my kids, and I'm always willing to listen. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to change my belief or my opinion, but we can have a good conversation about it. And I respect their opinions, even though it may be different from mine most of the
And and that's been something that I love. You're my mama,
time.
and you are my mama, and I see you as my mama. That being said, I also feel just as equipped in being able to teach you things as you have been doing for me. And that's been a really you you had a pretty great transition to dealing with adult children, and that can be a really hard transition because so often um, parents sometimes always view their child as a child that they need to impart information, but we have the ability to learn from our kids, and you learned from us even when we were little children, and so that didn't stop. And I think that really helped your relationship with grown children because you showed them you showed us that you were teachable from the get-go. So you modeled teachability in us, and we kept that going on. And that's so valuable and so important to to be able to have that mutual relationship. Everybody's challenging me right now as to how in the world can you have snakes in your home, and I'm saying to them, well, because I've changed my beliefs on snakes. And I've done that because my daughter has educated me on them. And she has convinced me of that. She has helped me and walked me through my fears and helped me to gain ownership of it. Like learn, why am I scared of a snake, and why is a snake a bad thing, and is it really? And all of a sudden, my world has been opened up, and oh goodness, our house is opened up to a whole bunch of snakes. It's been a learning opportunity for the whole family to go
Sure.
through together. Okay, on the golden rule, and again, going into authenticity, we've been talking about just being authentic with who we are, and owning our faults. The fifth rule here that we had was just going by the golden rule. I mean, it's respecting. You talked about no back talk
Yeah.
and respecting privacy. Talk a little bit about those and what you mean by the golden rule then.
Well, treating everybody else the way you want to be treated. I think that was something that was really ingrained in me as I was growing up, because I there were there was a lot of dysfunction in our home, and I didn't have a father. I was kind of made to be the surrogate spouse in the family, and I did a lot of the things around the house and in our family that a spouse probably would have taken part in. I don't know, because I wasn't raised with that. I see it now, of course. I know that now because of the home that we've had. I think I worked hard to overcompensate
Hmm.
for some of the things, some of the lack that I had growing up. But one of the things that I always wanted from an early age was just to have people treat me the way I treat them, and I would work so hard. I am the ultimate people pleaser. I know that. I have enabling down to a fine art. I think I have a doctorate degree in that. I've learned a lot about myself in the last 20 years. Trust me, 50 was kind of a turning point for me in learning more about me than I ever really wanted to know. And I did a lot of introspection, reading, finding mentors, counseling, all kinds of things to get through some of the trauma from childhood, but recognizing that my desire to treat others the way that I wanted to be treated became monumental to me. And so I tried to teach my children that, but I do think it's a biblical principle. It's a principle that just makes sense. If you want to be respected, give respect. And that's what this whole broadcast is about. If you want respect, you have to get it. You have to give it rather. You can't just expect your children to grow up knowing how to respect you, to speak well to you and not backtalk or disrespect you in any way, and to do that with other people. You've got to start it in the home. It isn't going to be taught any other way. I had to learn from mentors and from a lot of reading and a lot of going to church and a whole lot of things in my life to try to learn respect in the healthy way that it should be given in the home. And I highly recommend teaching your children that by example. That's the best way for them to learn.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. I agree completely, and that is just going into thinking about that with every model that you do. Is this the way I would want to be treated for you? And also just reminding your kids that.
I
So I do that a lot. The kids
Yes.
just this morning. Juliet was she was letting her sister know how much better she was at reading, and I said, Jules, how would you feel if you were if the roles were reversed?
Yeah.
And well, I wouldn't mind. Really? You think that wouldn't bother you? Okay, well, it would. All right. Well, what did it do did it add to your relationship with your sister to say that to her? No. Okay. So just kind of laying these things out, and we respect our kids, and we respect everything about them. That also means respecting their privacy, respecting their body, respecting their boundaries, letting them set boundaries. Having those things are great. You can still do those things, and it's not that you lose authority as a parent at all. um, I respect my kids' privacy. You talked about something at night. Right now, because we are on the East Coast and my kids have lived West Coast for so much too, and it's daylight until 9 o'clock. Putting them to bed at 7 o'clock is a joke. That's not going to happen. It doesn't mean that we've thrown that out the window. We've done a lot of different variations as our kids have gotten older, but a biggie right now is that all three love journaling at night, and they journal every night, and that takes up a good amount of the evening where they can journal, and Nathan and I still get that time one-on-one for us. But Ellie and Juliet are so eager to show me everything in their journal, and I've talked to them about this is where you can write anything you want, and this is a place for you to write and be free to write. And this isn't, I'm not grading you on your writing. I'm not telling you you have to correct everything in here. This is for you to pour out who you are, and have a place to kind of process through things you're thinking. And so I'm very big on honoring that. Now, I don't say you guys can have a private computer in your bedroom with the door shut and you can hop on the computer at all times. So it
Right.
doesn't mean you have to throw all caution to the wind and kids always have a shut door. No. 90% of what my kids do is out in public where everybody can see anything that's going on anyway. There is a lot of freedom with internet because everything is open and we're all seeing what's going on constantly. So you set limits around what this needs to be, but giving your children a safe place to have some privacy, something to be where they are alone with their thoughts, or they have a sacred spot in the house that's just theirs. I mean, I value having a little bit of something that's just mine, that's for no one else. And it's not because I have a secret to hide or I'm deceitful. It's because it's important to have a safe haven
Hmm.
just within to go
Hmm.
to. So
Yeah.
allow your kids to have that as well.
Amen.
All right. Boy, we've gone on for a while, and I know we could keep on going with this. And I so appreciate you coming on and talking about respect. We have, just in honor of Mother's Day this week, I have a few special things that are going on. I'm going to put in the notes and below in the comments for this. I'll put a link to mamasaysnamaste.com/mothers day. If you go to mothers day on mamasaysnamaste.com, you will get all kinds of goodies. I have compiled, actually, I say I loosely because this is another awesome mama in our network, and that is my mom assistant, Sheila. And Sheila has compiled some of great resources for you, where if you go there, you can get a guided meditation for moms that I did, a 15-minute guided meditation. You can get a link to creating your own family vision, which we talk so often about on here. If you are not sure where to go or how to get started with building respect and fostering respect in your home, this is a great way to get started. And that's something that we had growing up in our household, and now I have in my household with my kids. It also has 3 mindset shifts to help you. It's got more links for different resources and a special bonus of the disc personality snapshots. So the personality snapshots we talk about as the foundation and understanding who you are and how your family ticks. These are 40% off for mamas from now until Monday. So through the weekend, they will be for 40% off plus a free ebook that I'm doing. So you got all kinds of perks if you just go to /mothers-day, and I'll also put a link to them in the show notes. On top of that, if this video or podcast, however you're watching this, if this resonated with you, you have a key takeaway from it or a question or a comment, I am going to encourage you to reach out and comment. This will be featured through Instagram, through Facebook, on my website, in an email. And I'm going to be looking for comments and engagement and takeaways. And between now and Sunday, I will be responding to all of these. I'm going to select 3 people out of those who are going to get a copy of Mom's book, Creating a Haven of Peace. And you'll get a few extra goodies along with it. I want to give a special prop for those of you who are listening and engaging and giving me some feedback on things that you love on here. So have a wonderful rest of your week this week. Focus on just the beauty of where you are in life as a mama, where you are in this moment. Stop and just take a deep breath. Appreciate what is. Appreciate your children, appreciate your partner. Look for some things to be grateful for today and every day. Celebrate your mama and get to know your family. The more you know, the more you grow, the more you can stay connected, and the way you can see how the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Namaste. Thanks, Mama. Love you.
Love you too, babe.